What's up, team? It is your man, your biggest fan, the real Casadero, and here we're gonna be live streaming, debugging a web application that's written using Vue, JavaScript, Node, and Express, and then there's a bunch of other packages that are mixed in. So anyway, I've edited a bunch of code, and I've got since my last commit, I have 6 changes. And I'm just going to walk you guys through, or I'm just going to go through and debug all of these live here online with you guys. So the music you hear streaming is coming from Thanatos Prime's live feed right now on YouTube. Thanatos the Prime. And so let's get to it. We're going to be using Visual Studio Code. I hope you guys can see the code. And as I go through and I do these things, you're gonna get to see some of the features that Visual Studio Code has. But the biggest thing is you're gonna get a behind the scenes look of what it's like building software and debugging a application. And this is most of software development is most of software development is planning out what the software is gonna be, and then you write the code. And then you debug it, but you spend most of your time either planning or debugging. You don't spend that much time coding unless it's something brand new that you've never done before. And I've never built a full-scale application using Vue, JavaScript, Node, none of that stuff. So this is me going through it. But up until my last commit, both servers were running. And what you can see, I'm gonna hit Control B to hide that side panel. And what you can see here is on the left, I have a terminal window, so this is just plain old PowerShell, and I have a front end server running here, and it puts out there's an open connection on port 8080. So if I go where's it at? Firefox. Man, I got a lot of Firefox windows open. Here, let's do this. Windows Firefox. It should open a new window. I already opened it on the other desktop. So if we go here, if we go to http semicolon / localhost semicolon or colon, whatever the two dots are, 8080. All right, so hold on, what is going on here? HTTPS, maybe I spelled something wrong. Oh, HTTPS, and because I don't have SSL set up on my local machine. All right, so we go here. And so this is the main face of the application. So the front web server is running. Now I have a backend server running on port 8081 that is currently, well, it's supposed to be running, but it's not running right now. So we get unable to connect. And that's because we have all of these errors in our code. And we're just going to go through, we're just going to start debugging these. So let me take the font down. I'm going to hit Control minus, oops, I'm going to click here, hit Control minus, to make the window shrink down a little bit. And actually, let's do no, this is fine, we'll leave it here. So what happens is every time we save our code, the backend code reads all of the code, looks for errors, and then if there's no errors, it'll start the web server, and then we can connect to it on port 8081. If there are errors, then the server doesn't start. And the deal is the reason why there's two is so we have 8080, which is the client side. So that's how you connect to the web application on port 8080. And then the client side code talks. It sends web requests to the back end server on 8081, and then that server returns a response. So in this application, we're going to be writing to a database and reading from a database. And that's what happens. That's what the interactions are. But we can't reach that database right now because the server's not on. So, and we actually, prior to these errors, there was no database. And now we've written all the code for the database and everything. And we just need to make sure it's working before we do our next commit. So if we look over here, if we go click this icon, it brings up Git. These are all the files that have been edited. So we installed a couple packages in the package.json. I mean, we installed some packages on the server side. And here, just to give you an idea of what the architecture is like. So we've got our client side code here, and we've got our server side code here. So they're two separate folders. This package.json doesn't have a lot in it actually. This one, right? Oh, this is a lock file. All right, so there's nothing. We don't even have to worry about this. But if we go into the client side, and let's see if we can minimize some of these. So we got a package.json. So on the client side, these are all of our packages and dependencies. And then on the server side, we have a folder that is similar to that. And if we go to the server side, and this is showing us all of up here at the very top, not here, but over in GitHub. This is showing us all the files that have been edited. So when I installed new dependencies or new packages, they were added to the package.json, but that's not what this is. This is the settings.json for, what is it? Yeah, so this was updated, but I didn't update this. This was updated automatically when I installed those packages, and probably the last time I tried to start the server. But what I did update is I updated the app.js, and you can see the changes here from the previous version. So from the last commit, what you see here in green are the changes, and I moved some code from here to some other files just to clean up the pages a little. Because the app.js, this is the main web server application for the backend. And I had endpoints that were written in here. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, that makes sense. But the more you watch this kind of stuff, and the more you do it, and the more you learn, like the easier it becomes. Like a few days ago, like a week and a half ago, a lot of this stuff was foreign to me. I knew HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but as far as using model view controller methodology to build an application and then to link the front to the back and all this stuff, all new stuff to me. So anyway, so these are the changes we made over here in green, and this is the red. So here we see where things have been taken away, and green is those changes. And so the app.js file, which is the main server application, and you can see I added a couple of dependencies here, and one of the maybe all of the issues are because of the way these dependencies are being read, because I didn't write sequelize, but I wrote the config file, and I wrote the file that's in the models folder, and I probably got something wrong. All right, and then we updated routes.js. Well, actually, we created routes.js. That's why there's no previous version. We created the config.js, which is where we store all the configs for the web server. We created the user.js, and this exports a sequelize function that basically writes to the database. And then here we have our index.js, which, what does index do? Okay, so the index is where we make all of our calls. Well, actually, we don't. We make all of our calls from. Yeah, the index file is like think of it like a gateway to the rest of the application. And so here we got a bunch of requires that happen, and then so all of these, well, you see all of these are constant variables. So what happens when the application starts, everything you see here is loaded into memory. FS is a module that gives us file system functionality. Path is a module that gives us path, well, again, file system directory functionality. Sequelize is a package that I installed that allows us to read and write from a SQL database. And then we got config. We got the config, which is the config file that I created here. So in the index.js, we're calling the config file, and then we got the config file over here. And this file is exporting what port we're on, and then all of the database information that's used to generate the database, and then write users to the database. All right, and then we've got the user. So this is our user model right here, and this is just saying, all right, we're exporting this function so it can be called from somewhere else. And when this function is called, sequelize is fed in, and then the data type. So whatever, this is typically a JSON object that's going to contain like username, email, password. And so that's fed in, and then sequelizes defines the define creates the user and then populates that information and tells us what kind of information it is. And then we have unique set to true here because when we write to the database, we don't want to have duplicates. If we leave out unique, then two users could come on and they can create accounts. And if those accounts are similar, like maybe they have the same name or the same email address or something like that, they would be reading and writing from the same database. So you just use unique. And then we have, and that's it. So these are all the files that were either updated or created. And of course, this one was updated and then created. But of course, because I created all of these, there's probably some typos, some semicolons, spaces, all kinds of stuff in the wrong place. And so we're going to go through and we're going to figure those out now. And yeah. And so a little more information. Just a few days ago, well, I say a few days ago, but it's probably been 7 or 8 days, maybe 9 or 10 or something like that. I knew how to use Git from the command prompt, and I actually have an intro guide to how to use Git. And for those of you that don't know, Git is a version control. So what we can do is we can create, and I've used Git for photos, for all kinds of stuff. We can have a file, and then we could say, okay, we want to keep this version of the file, but we want to make some changes or do some more work to it or something like that. So what we do is we commit all of our changes. So basically we save all of our changes and then we keep working, and then we save our changes and we keep working. And what we have is a history, and we can go back through this history and we can look at all of our changes. We can go back to any previous changes. We could go back to a previous change and we can create what's called a branch and then create something completely different on that branch. And then we can merge it back into the main application. There's all different kinds of things we could do using Git. And so I was using Git on the command prompt. I wrote a whole tutorial on how to use Git on the command prompt. And I didn't know how to use it in Visual Studio Code until maybe like a week or 2 weeks ago or something like that. So this stuff, the more you do it, the more you learn through repetition and failure, the better you get at it. And that's basically what the whole channel, the Web Dev Construct, is all about. So let's go back up here and let's see if we can find these errors. So what I have down here is if you hit the Control tilde key, that's the little key underneath your escape key. It's got the squiggly line thing on it. Let's see, let me show you. So Shift, that's the tilde key. On that same key, if you don't hit Shift, you get these things, and you only get one typically, but in Visual Studio Code they give you two because these are used to enclose strings. But the tilde key is called this particular symbol right here that I have highlighted. This is called it's either a grave symbol or a backtick symbol. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because in Visual Studio Code, if you're on Windows, if you hit Control tilde key, it'll bring up the terminal console deal. All right, so now we got the console open. I'm gonna hit Control B to close this side window over here. Actually, there we go. Control B to close that side window, and it just gives us a little more space. And then I'll bring this up a little bit. We'll just drag that. So here we have the front end server, which is running and it's working fine. And here I'm going to open another Firefox window. I'm just going to copy this. Control C, open V, and then we're going to set this to 8080. All right, so we've got 8080 up and running, but the backend server 8081 no worky. All right, so I'll move that over here. And let's see. All right, so so the server has tried to start. We see it here, and it's telling us we got an error, module.js 549. Module.js 549 throw. So somewhere in our module.js file, I'm gonna save this index file up here. Module. Control B to bring this back. We go up to our files. Actually, if we hit Control Shift P, nope, we don't want Control Shift P. If we get Control P, we can look for modules, MODUL. And so this is not something we wrote. This is something this is a module that we've imported somewhere that is reading something like some data that we're giving it, and it doesn't know what the hell is going on. All right, and it's telling us right here, cannot find config. All right, so that's super simple, right? If we hit Control P, we go config, and this is referring to the config.js file. Now, another way to get to this file super quick, let's close all these windows up here. So if we go up here, we can go close. Here, we'll just go close other, and then we'll close that one. So now we got no open files. It gives us a link to the file right here. If we hit Control and click this link, it'll open the file. In the construct. Oh, what's going on? Tracker 0. All right, and so this is where the fun begins. This is reading error logs and what has happened to Thanatos, the prime. We need some music over here. Music, where are you? YouTube, Firefox. It's a live. Okay, so the connection has gone bust, which means my stream connection is probably garbage too. All right, so while I'm waiting on Thanatos to reload, let's go back over here and look at this. Cannot find module config at function module resolve file name. All right, so here we're calling that module config right here. Music's back, perfect. We're calling that module from here, but it can't find it, right? And so this is confusing to me too sometimes. So this file here, and it tells us right here where it's at. It's located in the server source models folder. All right, so that's fine. All right, so server, source, and then models. So for us to get to this config.js, we have to back out a directory and then go down a directory. And so one of the easiest ways to do this is to just find the config.js, right click, and then go copy path. Or we could go copy relative path. Let's see what that does. All right, let's go down here. We're going to paste this right here. All right, so server source config.js. All right. So if we look up here, we're in the sources models folder. So we need to back up one directory, which is what these two dots are. And we need to go into the config directory, and then we need to go into this config.js file. So we're requiring this as a dependency. And here it looks like this is correct, but we can't reach this file for whatever reason. So what we're going to do is let's go into the config directory and open up this file. And it'll just open it right next to the other one. All right, so in the config file, module.export port process ports. Oh, look, that's it right there. Config. This should be named config. So we'll click here, go down here, we'll go rename. Now this is the cool part. So here we'll make this big all the way up to the top. Because when I save, so I'm going to name this config. When I save this file, the server is going to read all of the files and is going to whatever it's doing in the background, and it's going to restart. It's going to try to restart the server. All right, so config.js, enter, and then here we'll go back here, save index, control save, and if we scroll down, look, it's restarting. But we have errors. Cannot find module config. Oh, understandable. All right, so this is kind of confusing me right now. So I'm gonna hit Control C. Yes, we're gonna exit that. I'm gonna clear out the screen by using clear, and then we're gonna put a semicolon here. And these are PowerShell commands. So clear clears the screen. Semicolon says, okay, go on to the next command that you want to give us, and that command is going to be npm start. So the screen is going to clear, and then the web server is going to start again, and we'll get a fresh batch of errors, I'm sure. Alright, attempting to start the server. And things are a little slower because I'm using OBS, which eats up processor, and I'm streaming to YouTube at the same time, so everything is just a little slower than it normally is. All right, so we still can't find config. So let's look at our folder name first. All right, so congif. This should be config. All right, so we're gonna rename the folder. Rename. And it probably looks like I made these on purpose, but I didn't. That's just typos, regular old typos. And this is what's frustrating about programming, because last night I was up all night long. So at sometime at 11 p.m. yesterday, I made a commit, and then I added a module. I think it was, where is it at? I have the notes here actually. So I'm gonna go into Notion. And these are all the notes that I'm taking while I'm building this app, because I'm gonna turn it into a full course so everybody else can learn. But if we go, let's go to the construct, and I think the errors I saved at the bottom of this page. And the internet is just struggling right now. And if I'm not responding in chat because I'm not watching the chat, because I'll confuse myself. But after we cleared out all the bugs, I'll check the chat, and if you guys have any questions about anything, I'll answer your questions. So right here I've got the errors and bugs. And I just thought about recording this kind of stuff last night. So this is the only error that's in here, but I fixed it already. And there's other bugs, as you can see, but we're going to go through and fix those. So here, right, when I wrote this file, and where was it? Trying to walk to get 4.4. Here's my let's get commit. So in the commit, it'll tell me what folder this is. I don't even remember what folder this is in. I think this has to be on the client side, because I'm calling the 8081 port. So let's see if we can find this real quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for it, but I do want to show you guys like what was holding me up for 9 hours, because I didn't figure out the problem until it was early. It was like 8 in the morning when I figured it out. Where is it? All right, so we got the config folder. Oh no, that's not the right. So we want to be in the source folder. So source, components, router, services, maybe it's API. Yep. So this was missing, and that was causing everything to crash. So what would happen is I could hit the server from the back end using this program called NodeMon. I could send a raw JSON HTTP request to the server saying register a new user, and it will return me the email address and the password for the new user. But when I built that functionality into the web application, if we go to register, REGISTR, and I'm using Firefox. So here I'm gonna make this full screen, and we'll zoom in, Control plus, and then if we hit Control Shift L, Control Shift I, it'll bring up the internet debugging tools. So we'll go u@email.com, and we'll go password is 1 2 3 4 5 6, whatever, it doesn't matter. And if we hit register, what we should get back is, hey, your user has been registered, have fun. But we're going to get back a 404 error because the server is not running. No, so not a 404 error, just an unhandled promise rejected. And we're getting this error because the server is not running. And so I ran into this yesterday. Yesterday I was getting a 404 error, and 404 means not found. And I was going, okay, somewhere in my code, something, the link between the front end and the back end is broken, and I couldn't figure out where it was. And I just started looking through all of the code that I had in the source folder, and just by chance I noticed that there was only one whatchamacallit here, one / Now, what's interesting is, right, is because this is an invalid web address, and I have ESLint installed, and what ESLint does is it reads your code and it tells you when there's errors, but it didn't catch this, and probably because it's not an ESLint deal. Now, we could go into ESLint and we could create a parameter to verify, or we could, or however ESLint does it, but we can create something that will look at HTTP addresses, and if they're typed wrong, then it'll spit out their error. But I had no error, and I couldn't figure it out. So anyway, well, I guess here's one indicator, because with that one line, this is not a valid address. With 2 lines, it's a valid address. And when it becomes a valid address, we can control and click it like any other link, and it'll open. Here, I'll show you guys. So if we go over here, put that right there, go right here. Control B to close this side panel. If we control click this, it'll open the browser. So this is just something, this is for future reference for you guys who get into web development, who are thinking about it. If you run into an issue where you're trying to hit a backend server or a server anywhere, and you're getting a 404, but you know it's there because, like, you can hit it through some other method, then it's probably something to do with a URL somewhere, and this is one way to figure it out. All right, so I'm gonna move that back over here. We'll make this full screen again, and we can, I don't want to, yeah, we'll save the changes. I didn't really change anything. And as you can see, when we save changes on our front end code, then the front end server does the exact same thing as the back end server. So we fixed the last error with the not being able to find the config file, and it was because we had the folder name wrong and the file name wrong. So we fixed those. Cannot read property database of undefined at object anonymous. All right, so this one is a little tougher. Let's see. Let's close these 1, 2, 3, and let's go back here. Click here. Server models index.js. All right. I don't know why it's not giving me the option to select this and go to it. All right. So anyway. It's telling us look at line 9, column 13. So let's go to users, tab tracker 0, server. All right, so we go down here to our server folder. Everything, most of these errors are going to be coming out of the source folder, because that's the only place. That's where we write all of our source code. So when we talk about the source code, this is the source code. The whole thing, it consists of source code, but this is our source code that we've written in this source folder. Everything else is dependencies. Packages that we need that add functionality, give us an easier way to do things in our application. So source models index. All right, so we got to go into the models folder, and we're looking for the index file, and look, it's in on line 9. Column 14. And so check this out. This would be interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Actually, we should be starting from 0. Let's go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, so it's telling us here. I want to say it's trying to land on the D, but I could be wrong. But anyway, this line. So what it's saying is that when we call this, it doesn't. This is undefined somewhere. So we've missed something, and I don't know what it is. Let's see. C users, tab tracker server model index. Cannot read property database. open this one too and see. So again, this is a link. If we hit control and just click it, it'll open the file. So this one says line 7, 21, SQL require models. All right, so this is where programming gets interesting, because we have to read this code and understand what it's doing, and then we can figure out what the problem is. So here it's saying config.db.database cannot read property database. Type error, cannot read property database of undefined. All right, so it's telling us database is undefined. That's what I'm seeing. I could be wrong though. So config. So we may need config. And let's config. All right, export module db. Looks fine. Cannot read property database of undefined. You're going to look at routes.app. I may be going down a rabbit hole here. Which is, where are you? Alright, so it's going to be in the source, of course. Source routes.js. Alright, not. Oh, did we scroll up too far? Yeah. Okay. Let's try something. Let's go. Oh, now it wants to work. And it takes us right to line 9. So, all right, sequelize equals new sequelize config.db. So we call the config. We feed it db database. I bet you anything I've got database spelled wrong somewhere else. Just where is the question. Alright, so require the file structure, require the paths, bring in sequelize, bring in the config, which is works now. We got our DB, which is empty. Count sequelize equals new sequelize. Here, let's try something. We're gonna comment this out. Save. See what the server does. Alright, so here we're trying to read all of these. We're trying to read a dependency that doesn't exist right now because we commented out. Alright, so here, let's do this. We'll drop all of these. Save. All right, so what this is telling us right here. Now that since we commented these out, the lowercase sequelize doesn't see, like, there is no db.sequelize. There's only the uppercase. There's no lowercase. So, and what these do is they give us. So I created these. They give us access to the same thing, but two different ways of gaining access. That's why there's uppercase and lowercase. So if we comment this out, and in here I'm just selecting these and then hitting control /, and that automatically adds comments. And this works across, as far as I know, it works in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I think that's it. So it probably works across all languages. So whatever commenting is in a language, control / will make a comment. I believe, not positive though. All right, so we stop that. Control S. Index 24. Oh, I got this rogue S right here. Where did that come from? Anyway, all right. Save. The server will rebuild itself. All right, so we're back to can't find config after we've commented out most of our code here. Where is it having this problem as a service app.js? All right, app.js config. Where is app. So app.js is here. The config folder is there. We need ... Save. The server will rebuild itself. And this is where it gets really interesting. All right, so it took us to line 8. It's saying it can't find this thing. Config config conscript count to app express. Well, so ... So if we're here, it'll take us up one folder level. Then it'll go into the config folder, and then it'll go into the config.js, which exports itself, which is fine. Port for database processing VDB. this is fine. Or is it saying cannot find module config? So app.js. All right. What's going on? Service. This is it. But there's only one. Let's see. Okay, all right. So that fixed that problem, I think. All right. 16 require routes is not a function. Type error require. REQUIRE require is not a function. It's not. So basically, what's happened, right, is we by requiring routes, we pull in the routes, and then we load those routes into the app variable. So now we can use, and this is all stored in memory. So we can use app with all of the, well, we can use routes with all of the functions, methods, whatever, objects that are exposed to us from Express. And this is why program is so damned confusing, because there's all kinds of stuff going on. So construct tab trackers. 16 require routes, and it's saying this is not valid, but it is valid, and it's probably saying it's not valid because we've blocked out a bunch of code in our, where is it, in our index file. Well, no, that should not be the case, actually. Let's see. Trying to think through this. All right, what other files did I mess around with in here? User. Let's see what that's about. Realize data types. Password. This is fine. The server's working hard. All right, we'll figure you out, buddy. Const equalize new. Equalize. Password options. We go look back at the config.db here. Where are you, buddy? Oh, hold up. No exports. I think we might have solved it. Well, hopefully. Let's see. Let's go back to index and uncomment this line of code here. So if we just click it, my computer's acting weird now, man. What the hell? All right. You go to this line and just click it, and then hit Control /. It'll uncomment that, and so we'll save this save. We'll go back to config, and this should be module.exports, not module.export. Right, so if we go back and we type this, we go module. Right, so we can autocomplete module.ex sports. I don't know how I got the S. And so here, there's no red under squiggly line or nothing like that because, and this is just sort of, this just dawned on me, is that because we can have a function somewhere else called export, or an object somewhere else called export. So our code, the Visual Studio code in the linter doesn't know that this isn't a thing. It could be a thing, right? Maybe we meant to write that, so that it doesn't tell us an error. That's what it should be. Let me go back through the rest of this here. DB database. So that's why we couldn't see database, because this wasn't being exported. We're calling the config file. We can see the config file, but nothing. But we couldn't see any of the code in the config file, which basically meant we couldn't see the config file. Well, not us, but well, the other parts of the application couldn't see it. All right, so let's see, tab tracker. All right, so database process environment, DB name. All right, so this is saying uh, our database property is going to be equal to whatever DB name is, and DB name is going to be is generated when the database is created for the first time. And this could be changed anytime. And then DB user is in the database, passwords in the database, and then we've got some options for the database and the web server and all of that stuff. All right, DB 8081 tab track. And these two double lines, these are or. So we're saying, all right, database is equal to either process.environment.db name or tab tracker 0. So in our local environment, everything's going to default to tab tracker 0, and then our actual storage, the database is going to be tab tracker 0.SQLite, and this is where all of the information is gonna go and be stored. All right, so this looks legit. Let's control to save it, see what happens. Now we're just waiting on the server to do this thing. All right, let's see. Oh, we still got this problem. Deprecated string-based operators are now deprecated. Okay. So this right here requires me to go read some sort of documentation somewhere. But this isn't it's not causing a problem right now. It's just sort of a warning. No module 42 user requirement construct. But this caused problem. What is it? Let's require routes. Maybe let me go back. App.js. Wire. App.js 916. This is referring to actually routes.js. Look, module.export. This should be exports. So we've required app. So looking for app. Can't find it because it's not being exported. Well, actually, it's looking for routes. Can't find routes because the code in routes isn't exposed. All right, so we're going to save. See what happens now. All right. That is it. We have fixed all of our bugs. So it says, look, we're live on port 8081. And if we pull up the web browser again, let me find it. Bam, bam. Nope. Where are you, my friend? There we go. And we refresh this, we should get cannot get. Which means if we go to the front end and we hit register, we're returned a value. And we know the back end works because it returned us a value. But say for instance, before we built this snazzy little interface here to do this, we would use this app called Postman, and we would send a HTTP post request raw JSON. We send the JSON file, and it would give us some sort of reply back, right? And we get that same reply here that we got over here. So now that that's all done, we can commit all of our code and talk about all of our changes, right? So if we go into Git, right, so we got 7 changes. in the in our when the server initialized, the tab tracker SQLite database was created. So now we have that too. So we can click up here, this little check mark to commit. Is going to add all of our files to the staging area. It's going to give us a message block so we can see what we've done. So we could say updated app.js, created routes, rout.js, route.js, created routes.js config. And you can type anything you want in here. This is just so when you look back through the history, you can see what you did. Config.js, users.js, and index.js. So we got all of those, and then tested. We tested the user creation endpoint, register endpoint using browser and postman, and it'll add all of our changes. All of these files are going to go away. I mean, they still exist, but they're going to disappear because we're current. Like this is just saying that we've saved all of our work. So let's see if I can run you guys through this really quick. Let's see, so we go here. So if we go to the client side, what happens, right, is what we're doing is we're building what's called views, hence Vue.js, I guess. And everything is a component. So this is the main page component that shows us, and if we go, where's it at? Here. Copy this, Control C, Control Tab, Control V, Enter. All right, so this brings up the main, and Control 0. That's the normal size. So this brings up the main page. So what's happening is we have a server running on the front end. It's our Vue server, and it just does HTTP routing. So when somebody comes in and they don't specify any value after the initial web address. Now, when this is live, this will be like www.whatever.com. But for now, we can just pretend that this section here is the .com. And actually, we didn't even type this. So what happens is when a request comes, and this is a HTTP GET request that would come from a client, like so another computer out on the internet somewhere, the server receives the request and it goes, okay, this person is looking for the home page, and then it literally just puts together the home page and sends it back to them. If we go to the register page, register, right, it says, okay, this person wants to go to the register page, and it returns the register page, and they have these two fields that they can use to create an account. So we can just type some craziness in here, it doesn't really matter, and bam. And then if we Control Shift I, we can look at the console.log statement. And so check this out. If you look down here in the corner, when we hit the database, it shows that we hit the database. So this is logging. So the component we installed, Morgan, is what's printing out these logs. And then on the console, we're getting this back. So this is saying it's hitting the back end. So what happens is when somebody shows up on the register page, which is here, all right, they fill out their information in the form fields up here. And when they click this button, this is the event lister, they click the button, it triggers this method down here, which is the register method. And the register method goes out and it calls the authentication service, which is located maybe Sabians. Yeah, there it is. Services. So it calls the authentication service, which is here. The authentication service pulls in the API, and we have this Axial thing. So this is where our HTTP request is created, right? So it puts together all of this information. It says, all right, the base URL for this HTTP request is going to be 8081. So if we go back to not users, man, we're so deep. We're so deep. Apps. Where are we supposed to be? It what? No routes. Jeez, I've lost myself. I've gotten lost. We got so many files open. Let's go back to here. This is what we're looking for. At Vue JS. What? Yeah, routes. Register. There we go. All right. So all this information comes. So this information is sent and is packaged. Is we call the register. Here, let's see. So we got register here. So we put register in the front, right? We're calling the authentication service, which is, where did you go, buddy? Authentication service, which pulls in the information from API, not app, but API. Where's the API at? API. It's up here again. There we go. Puts in the information from API, packages it all up, says we're going to send it to this address. That information. All right, so everything is packaged up. It's sent off to the server, which is why when we go, where is it? There was something else that was showing us these backend folders. But so that's sent off to the server, port 8081, and then the server receives it here. Where is it at? Source config model.js app index. All right, and so because index is our serialized file for each DB serialized. Oh, is that? Is it index or nope? App. All right, yes. So app is the entry point. So that information is sent to app, and we are calling the route. So when it gets here, the route, so that information is fed into the route, and then the route calls app. Where's it at? App, where are you? Not app. Yeah, well, routes. I'm sorry. I'm confusing myself. All right, so we're here. And it says, okay, what's the route? And the route is register. So all of that information, the username, password, email address, everything, is sent to the register route. And then the register route takes this information in, and it loads it into the database. And when it's done loading into the database, the server responds, and that response is sent all the way back up the chain to, well, first it's sent here, right? So we get a message, hello rec body, email, your account was registered, have fun. And this is what we're seeing down here. I'm sorry, this is what we're seeing down here. So this is sent all the way back through the view and then written to the console. All the way back to the view and then written to the console. And that's an indication that our information should be written to the database. And that is that was a intense live debugging session hanging out with me here, the real Casadero. So if that for those of you who like that kind of stuff, if that's the kind of stuff you're into, if you're thinking about learning code, or if you've learned to code, and if that sounds like super confusing or whatever, I absolutely understand, because, and it's still confusing to me even looking at all of this stuff. And to be honest, in reality, a lot of like people who have jobs as developers, they, unless you're in a startup who'll edit the graphics, and then the graphics will go over to a front end developer. And then the front end developer, what he'll do is he'll take that image file and he'll slice it up into CSS. And so he'll and when he's slicing it up, what he's doing is he's adding classes and IDs to the CSS to point to different elements of these images. So he's saying this is a button, this is a picture, this is a slider, this is a whatever. And then you've got the back end developer who is working on all of this stuff that we talked about here today. How to route all of these things. What happens when this button is what really what really happens on the back end when this button is clicked. So like say for instance, let's go to a website like YouTube. Well, I mean, let's just pick a different site. So we'll bring this up and we'll go to, I'm trying to think of a site that takes some sort of input or something. It doesn't really matter. So here, this is one of my favorite sites, Wolfram Alpha. Wolfram ALPHA.com. So what happens is we go out to Wolfram Alpha, we hit what is it called? Domain name server. And we say, hey, so when we type this address in, we said, hey, domain name server, we want wolframalpha.com. The domain name server says, do we have that in our index somewhere? And it goes and it finds it and it says, yes, we have it. And there's a number behind it. That number is called the IP address. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 12 digits separated in threes, right? They're called octets. And it says, okay, we're going to return this page. And as you can see, like when we type Wolfram Alpha, right now it's hitting the domain name server. The domain name server says, yeah, we got this. It's a HTTP server. Here's the address. It sends the address back to the browser. And then the browser sends out a GET request to that address. That server at the IP address, and we don't know what it is. I mean, there's probably a way to find it in developer tools. But anyway, so it goes out to the HTTP server. The HTTP server says, okay, we're using an encrypted connection. We're going to send them back this information. And it sends back a web page, and that web page is typically a HTML file, some JavaScript for functionality, like when we scroll over these buttons and stuff, like how they change colors. And then CSS lays all of this stuff out. So CSS said, well, and actually these colors could be being controlled by CSS. I don't know for sure, and I don't want to look at the code right now. So we're on this page, and now we have all. Now these could be either other pages, but they're more than likely database queries. So like when we click on people, for instance, a request goes out. If we look up here, example, society and culture, people. And when we hit the people page, the server goes, okay, they're looking for people, and it puts together this whole view, and we come back and we see the people. And then so everything we do on this page has some sort of back-end function that happens. Like we hit Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is a field in a database somewhere. So when we click that button, it sends a request, a GET request for Harriet Tubman, and the back-end server builds the information. And what's going on now, right, is it returns the information it has, and then that little bit of wait time we had, the server was still processing. And so it said, hey, Vue, put up this processing thing until you get a response. And so the Vue put up a processing thing, and when we got the response, it printed the response to the screen. And so that is like the super simple ultra basics of web. And actually, you guys couldn't see any of that stuff because I had it. It was on my face the entire time. My bad. But this is what we did. I'll walk you real quick. So you heard everything I said. I'll go through this like super fast. So we type in an address up here. The address is sent to a domain name server. The domain name server says, yes, this address matches this IP address that we have on file. Sends the IP address back to our computer. Our computer then sends a GET request to that IP address. That IP address receives the GET request and returns a web page. And then everything on that web page pretty much goes through the same process all over again. So when we hit physics, it says it says it sends a GET request to that IP address looking for this information back. And then the server returns that information. And now here we have all of these buttons. We want more examples. We click here. A request goes out to the server. The server sends back that information. And so say for instance we wanted to log on somewhere. So we go sign in. The same thing. This is the exact same deal as the registration page. We're taken to a page. We give it some information. We hit this button, right? We're in an HTTPS connection. When we hit this button, these two things are encrypted, and then a request is sent across the internet. And on the other end, on the back-end server, that request is decrypted. And if it makes sense, if it's a username, if the server is programmed to receive this type of information, it goes okay. And once that information is received, if the person is a user, then it'll send back the page that comes after that. If they're not a user, then it'll send back another page that'll say like you're not a user, sign up or whatever. And that is like the super simple basics of web development. So for those of you who are thinking about becoming programmers or web developers or software developers, that is what it looks like. And that is what I spent 8 hours a day. Well, 9 hours a day sometimes. One day I remember I went to work and I came home and I worked until like 7 at night. But anyway, this is what I spent all day doing this at Microsoft. Not this web development stuff, but like literally I was in not Visual Studio Code. I was in PowerShell reading error logs all day long. That was my job. My job was to deploy code and assist in the automation process of deploying services to data centers. And I would start a deployment and something would go wrong. Like maybe the server it was supposed to deploy to was down, or maybe there was like a bug in the code from a previous patch or something like that. So I would either try to fix the problem or I would escalate the problem. All software issues were escalated because I wasn't there to write software. But like any server issues, if I could fix them, then I would try to go fix them. If I couldn't figure them out, then they would be escalated to somebody else. But this is what software developers get paid to do. They get paid to sit at a computer and figure out why stuff isn't working, and then when stuff is working, they get paid to figure out how to make it better. What new features can we add? What can these features do? How will these help the customer? This, that, and the third. And these are typically all business decisions that come down through some sort of pipeline. So say, for instance, we take like if we go back to Wolfram Alpha, for instance, somebody one day said, I want to build a website that allows people to come here and ask interesting questions. So if we go back to the Wolfram Alpha webpage, we can say, my goal is to finish building this application by the 28th. So we can go November. We could go how many days until November 28th. So somebody had to think this through, and so they decided, I want to be able to ask questions like this. And then either them, if they're a software developer, or somebody else said, okay, how do we do this? And they began thinking about the back end logic. All right, what kind of computational power do we need in order to do this? So somebody wrote that computational power, and then somebody had to figure out how to get it from the server that it was written on to people, right? And then somebody had to figure out, how do we send these requests? So if we look, like when we type this in and we hit send, if we look up here, how plus May plus days plus until plus blah blah. So all of this stuff is rolled into one big string. The string is parsed on the other end. A question is presented, and then there's some code that reads over this question and then looks for the best possible answer, and then gives that answer to another piece of code, and that code returns it all the way back to the front end. So somebody had to plan all of that out. And they're usually called like the software architect or whatever. And then somebody had to plan out the network, like how many servers do we need? What happens if 1 million people try to do this all at the same time, right? Do we need 1 million servers? Do we need one server for each person? How many people can be on one server? Then you got load balancers, and into all this stuff, it gets like super confusing, super complicated. But that's it, right? Software developers, software engineers, software architects, they receive they're paid because of their ability to sit at a desk, or sometimes, and this is why a lot of the big tech companies are the way they are. They have these sprawling campuses. They have like food and beverages and all this stuff. It's so the individual, the software engineer, can focus on what they need to focus on. They don't have to worry about if they're hungry, where they're going to get their food from, where they're going to get their drink from, where they're going to get their coffee from. If they need to take a break, they can go catch a nap, or go take a walk in the fresh air, or go play ping pong, or go play pool, or go do something like that. This is like thought-intensive work that these people are being paid to do. And that's why they get paid so much, and that's why the perks are so good, because it gets confusing. Like, this is a very small application, and I have bugs in it. And so in big applications, there's probably hundreds of bugs inside of this application here that we can't see because they've been coded around, or maybe the features were turned off and they haven't been turned back on yet. All kinds of stuff that we don't really get to see. I think that is it. Let's go back to YouTube and see if we've got some comments, and then if not, we're gonna shut this studio down. Go back. All right, so here, I'll move this over here. So this is OBS. Actually, we don't need to move that. Live dashboard. All right, so no chats. And one watching now, and I believe the one watching now is probably me. So team, that is going to wrap it up for this one. That is a live debugging session, live coding session, and what you can expect if you go down the road of software development. It's rewarding. You get to build stuff. You're a wizard. Like, you're building stuff from scratch all the time. Well, not all the time, but you have the ability to come up with the idea and then build it and then give that idea to the world. And that is super valuable. It's priceless. It's priceless. So if you're thinking about it, just take the plunge and subscribe to the channel here. You can follow me over at The Real Casadero on YouTube. And if you read the notes below this live feed, you can check out the Instagram page where I have the live updates every day. And in the near future, when I'm done building this app, I'm going to start putting together a course that's going to walk you through the entire process. Super detailed course. And we're going to go beyond that. So we're going to go from idea creation all the way up to marketing the application and bringing in paying customers. So guys, thanks for hanging out with me here. Again, it is your biggest fan, The Real Casadero, and I will see you guys next time. Talk to you later.